Welcome to Reframe the podcast, helping you reframe your thought patterns, habits, and mindsets to create the life that you want to lead. In today's episode, I am honoured to be chatting with Gillian Burke, who you will know from Autumn Watch, Spring Watch, and Winter Watch. Gillian is a biologist, a presenter, public speaker, voiceover artist, writer, and mother. Gillian is passionate about storytelling and science. Gillian's desire to have the unseen, the misunderstood, the unheard stories told is what drives her work. Seeking, as she describes herself, to help change the world so she can kick back on a plastic-free beach with an earth-friendly beer and not work so hard. Today we are chatting about everything and anything health related and our relationship with the natural world, how that impacts how we feel, how we eat, and how we interact with it. So without further ado, here is our chat. Hi Jill, and thank you so much for joining us today at Reframe. I really appreciate your time. And I think it would be great if we could just start, because obviously you will be a familiar face for many from Winter Watch and your work there, but that's not all you do, and that's not necessarily where you have initially come from, your background. So I just wondered if you could fill everyone a little bit more about who you are and what it is exactly that you do.
Well, listen, first of all, thanks for asking me. I'm really excited to do this actually, because I love the opportunity to talk about my interests, and actually more than just interests, like experiences, things, you know, the way I see life, the way I live life, just outside of that, I guess, you know, that role that I don't know how many people, I always imagine like when I'm doing Spring Watch and we're live, I just pretend that nobody's watching, because then it makes the whole thing a lot easier. So I sort of come off air and I come, you know, go into my little life, normal life, and get really surprised when people go, oh, you know, we saw you or whatever. Hopefully it's always nice, you know. Anyway, so so thanks so much. Like you say, I mean, that's one of my many hats, you know, being a presenter on that show. Weirdly, like I came to that role really late in life. I don't think it's a sort of career sort of, you know, curveball that you take or make or throw or get sent. I'm not quite sure which one you want to call it, but you know, sort of at you know, kind of when I really started that, I was sort of 42, so that was quite late, you know, to the party, as it were. So I've obviously lived a bit before all of that, and I mean, I'd say, I know it sounds like such a cliche, but it is genuinely the most important job I do, which is being a mum, trying to raise two people, you know, two humans, and to bring them up in a world that, you know, gosh, 2020 is like shown us like is very changing fast, and a future that we're not really sure what we're even preparing for, and trying to raise kids in that, and raise kids who are, you know, I hope, you know, although I have a feeling they're, you know, early teens already, so I've lost complete control. But anyway, hopefully, you know, they grow up to be, you know, just good people. That's as much as I will ever ask of them. So good, imperfect people, you know, like everyone. So that's like the most important job I do. But, you know, other stuff, and it's how we've made this connection actually through Jimmy, your brother and co-founder. Well, I don't know why I'm telling you that. You know that. Yes, let me tell you, Rose. You know, the other things that I do are outside of work. You know, I powerlift, or I used to powerlift. I haven't done that since lockdown, but I train, and you know, Jimmy's someone who, with the work that he does as a PT, that's been a really amazing thing and very consistent now for almost 7 years. I've been training with him and his team, and so, you know, that's a really important part of my life, is just fitness and strength training and all that kind of stuff, which I always think surprises people, because I don't look like someone who has, you know, gone and participated in like powerlifting competitions, and people go, oh, really, you know, because I look like I could probably break, you know, I think sometimes. So that's something I do. But actually, you know, if I had to pull all the threads of what I do together, the single most important thing, and it's been the way I've thought since I was probably about 4 or 5, is kind of this question about the way we live and how we impact the world around us and how the world around us impacts us. Um, and I probably obviously would not have said that at 4 or 5 years old, but quite genuinely, I was born in Kenya, and I was born at a time, with all the wonderful benefit of hindsight now, that was the beginning of this kind of slide, or nosedive maybe for some people, into some big issues. And some, they get separated out. There's a climate crisis here, an ecological crisis here, and the mass extinction here, and social societal breakdown, and all these things, in a pandemic. And actually, like, if you kind of cast back to the 70s and beyond and beyond and beyond, I mean, these things kind of were brewing and building up. And I felt like I was born into a family, for all sorts of reasons, had like a really high level of awareness around things to do with environment and social justice. I mean, these are words now that are bandied about a lot. We didn't use those terms back then. It was just about, like, can things just be a little bit more fair? Which sounds naive, but there you go. And that's kind of how I felt as a child. And I really set out with this sense of, like, I want to make a world a better place. And then I got laughed at when I said that, because it just sounded painfully naive, and it still does. But that feeling has not left me, ever. So I've kind of started to just say it out loud now, because I'm like, I don't know what to do with that feeling, because that's what motivates me. If I do anything else that's not aligned with that, it doesn't work for me. I don't feel good in myself. So that's me.
No, and it's a beautiful thing to hear you speak that, because I think so many of us don't know, even later in life, what our values are and what those beliefs are. And then when we can't live a life that's aligned to those, exactly as you articulated then, it's almost like something. And it's funny, I had a conversation with someone yesterday along the same lines. I said, if I find myself in a situation where I find myself making choices that don't feel aligned, no matter how naive someone thinks that is, or you're too this, you're too, you think too not, too nice, too caring, too worried about the world, all of those things. It's almost like a physical, it feels like there's something physically uncomfortable inside. It's, just as you said. So, and I think with age, as you say, do you agree? Do you think with age it's become easier to articulate and say it out loud now, and say that these are my values, this is who I am, and this is where I'm aligned? Or do you think that's something that's always been quite straightforward for you?
I think you're right. I think, yeah, it has become easier to say out loud. I used to. So I had sort of, when I was really little, and I'm saying, like, before I was 10 years old, that was not a problem, and no one seemed to challenge that. And I think maybe because there was a sense, at least people around me were like, oh, that's what children say. And maybe there was a sense of, like, when she grows up, she'll find out. And then I remember really clearly, I was probably in my early 20s, talking to, gosh, this is going to be like a very convoluted, my ex-husband's ex-stepfather. Really great guy, really just, charismatic, very funny, very knowledgeable. He is an American, and, sort of very active during the civil rights movement of the 60s, actually walked, with Martin Luther King Jr. And I remember saying to him, like, this is what I feel, I want to do in my life, is I want to make the world a better place. And I don't know if he meant to be, like, disparaging of that, but he challenged that as something that was, well, there's always going to be crap in the world. There's always going to be, and it really felt like, I honestly, like, I kind of feel bad, like, dropping in it, because, I don't think this was his intention, but the way I received it was definitely like, yeah, let go of that, and, like, reality, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, clearly, you're not going to fix everything, not like a lot of people, like, there's always going to be challenges and stuff. But I guess what I've come round to at this point in my life is, if I don't believe that's possible, or at least if I don't believe that's a worthy motivation in life, then what? You know, how do you keep going? Because my experience of life is it gets harder as you get older. It doesn't mean you don't enjoy it, but there are always challenges. So for me, that sort of feeling of like, this is why I do what I do. And I'm not waiting for the results to be happy in my life, but if that's what basically is my kind of magnetic north, guides my compass, my sort of, whether I'm going to say yes or no to a job, whether I'm going to say, how am I going to handle the situation? And I can tell you, I don't always get it right, but, like personal stuff, then I'm like, okay, is this the same vibe, I'm trying to put out in the world? And so maybe it's just a way of, maybe it's a survival strategy, actually, now that I've thought about it. It's like, you just got to keep believing it's possible, Yeah. So that's the way I get through.
No, and it's purpose, isn't it? We just to wake up with intention and purpose every single day. Thinking this morning, whilst I was getting dressed, I was thinking about how, you're a huge advocate for climate change and the environment and the change we can make and the choices we can make every day in our own lives to be, collectively be doing something. And I was thinking about our work at Reframe and diet culture. And from my point of view, I kind of like hop on my soapbox around the patriarchy a lot and the fact that, I think diet culture keeps women really small and all of those things. Actually, I was thinking about it from an environmental point of view this morning. And I was thinking, actually, diet culture, because it feeds this obsession with aesthetic and self-objectification and curating this particular way of looking and being. Actually, it's part of feeding commercialism and the buying of stuff and our need to have and our need to, have all those things. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I hadn't made that connection before.
I mean, I probably, so the where these two things meet, or, where your thinking space meets my thinking space is interesting, isn't it? Because there's all sorts of things going on at that junction. So I think you're right. A lot of it, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, so I'm just kind of going with my personal observations and experiences and stuff, but I would agree with you that the kind of, the cult of like, the image and, how highly tuned people's sensibilities are around even like what your eyebrows look like, and, I mean, the eyebrow thing, let's face it. It's next level, right? I remember so I'm going to go off on a tangent about eyebrows.
No, do.
I remember sort of like, I've all, because of the age I'm at, like I've always had that nice, like, high arch, clean, very thin eyebrows. And just at the point I was about to embrace like this boy brow thing and go for the whole thing, I remember seeing like, I think it was like Vogue or something like that. And it was a cover of Rihanna, and on it she had like what I describe as these pencil kind of Sophia Loren style penciled in like thin eyebrows. And I just thought, that's it, I'm not touching my eyebrows ever again because I can't keep up with this. So I mean, that's just a silly example, but I think you're right. Some of it is, a lot of it will be fueled by this machine, which is, keep buying stuff, update, upgrade, the latest look, the latest this. I mean, for me, diet and sort of that sort of body image personally has been an interesting journey, because when I was a teenager, I just was like stick thin. I was so painfully thin, and it didn't matter what I did. I was really sporty, I mean, I was like track and field and volleyball and basketball and field hockey. I just was always doing something, and I danced. I did ballet like from the age of 5 till I was in my mid-20s. So, but I ate like all the time, and not because I was thinking about it, it's because I needed to. Like I couldn't get home without stopping, and I hate to admit it, but there you go, like a Mickey D's. And I would just wolf down like, a cheeseburger, large fries, and then get home, open the fridge, guzzle down a liter of orange juice. I remember exactly what I used to eat. Then would like reach in, usually it was a block of cheddar cheese, eat that, and then maybe do a bit of homework. And then my folks would come home. My dad was the one who did all the cooking. He would cook up a massive meal, like real traditional kind of Kenyan food, or Creole food actually, and then eat that, probably 2 or 3 helpings sometimes, go to sleep, wake up hungry, and and repeat. But I was super skinny, and I kind of laugh now because back then I had the body that probably people think would be the, I don't even know what, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, really, really skinny. But back then it wasn't that attractive to be that skinny, because there was like Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista, and they're beautiful women. And, compared to sort of, I think maybe towards the 90s and noughties, there was like this kind of, everyone got really super skinny. And I guess with time, and as I see every decade pass, what I'm now noticing is, oh, this is a fashion. These are just like fads. And how do you keep up with this? It's a bit like the eyebrows. So yeah, I think the relationship between this like chasing this constantly moving target, that this ideal that you never quite get to, because as soon as you think you're there, it's moved. And so for me, like, I just didn't really get into that, because, and thank God, because for me, I guess sports was my ticket, and it became more important to me to be able to do the sports I did well. And so I just was like, engine, fuel, engine, fuel. And that was the relationship. And I pretty much, my thing is that I'm a happy eater. So I'll eat when life is good. And I cannot eat when I'm under major stress. So that's my sort of thing with food, is that I like literally my stomach just, what it feels like, it just goes into a little tight knot, and it's not letting anything in. And it's really like crazy, how I've noticed that, like really stressful times in my life, that, wow, okay, that my body just goes into like permanent fight, flight, freeze mode and just won't accept any food, which is, you can maybe get through like that for a while, but it's obviously not a great strategy for life. So yeah, wow, yeah, I'm not sure I answered your question there, the relationship with the environment.
No, but you did.
Consumerism, yes, definitely. I mean, just kind of dropping into a bit of sort of, I guess, what my background is in terms of my kind of professional presenter hat. As a biologist, I would say that, there is a definite link between our like health, human health, and soil health. I mean, I say soil health because I could talk about vegetables and the meat you eat and everything else, but actually everything begins in the soil. And soil biology is like one of those things. It's like, man, how do you get people excited about, like, the earth, but like, it's a whole ecosystem, it's a whole habitat, it's like a whole world, and within a world within a world. And there is this incredible community of microscopic organisms that, the way I like to imagine it, it's like a bustling kind of 3-dimensional space where there's tunnels and highways and superhighways, where nutrients and water flowing, and really complex chemical like polymers that help to bind the soil structure. And a healthy soil, what's really interesting about it is that, like, almost anyone will know the smell of a healthy soil. It's just that smell that you get when you walk through a woods, like just after it's rained, and it's that slight, it's not an unpleasant smell, but it's like a sweet, like a musty smell. It's very hard to describe. And that's the smell of like healthy earth, when there's a thriving community in it. And our bodies kind of need elements of that. We are like, our bodies are the same in a sense. We are a thriving community of bacteria. And if we are not receiving, it's like it works in tandem. All these systems are so much more connected than even like, the last 5, 10, 15 years. Biologists have made such amazing inroads into how everything is connected. So even just from like a really basic biology sense, and it's not basic biology, but what I mean is, for just looking at purely scientific, so we'll move this the consumerism and the capitalism and this and that out of the way and just go, ooh, healthy soil means healthy human. Dead, overworked, over fertilized soil, not so healthy human. And it's a simpler relationship as that. So it's kind of where we start with how we farm, both livestock and agriculture, and therefore what we eat and put in our bodies is all connected. So yeah, massive connection there.
In your opinion, where do we start then? If someone who wants to do all those things, I want to make an effort to be supporting the environment better, but I also want to be supporting my health. Where could someone begin? Where could they start that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think even, when I'm just talking about environment, it's such an overwhelming kind of, the challenges are overwhelming. So it sometimes feel like, oh man, where do I start? There are all these things. And I think actually, it's probably the most like powerful, meaningful, and in terms of like, I was going to use an expression. It's probably not entirely appropriate. I'm trying to think of another one, but bang for buck, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, starting with what food you buy or grow and then put in your body is really like fundamental. Like how we farm and how our food is produced is a huge part of like the disruption to the ecosystem, but also the disruption to human health. Like the two are kind of the same thing. They're just symptoms showing up in different ways. So, one of my biggest bugbears is the association that's made with certain labels. So like organic food, I feel kind of pushes a lot of people away, just the thought and the sound of it, because it sounds like really wholesome and it sounds really unattainable and it is really expensive. And it just pushes people away, because like I'm like, I get that. Like I've got a really good inner saboteur who, when I'm trying to get on like a nice healthy tip, it is just there going, okay, I know what you're trying to become, but I'm going to make sure, so I've got to work hard against that, actually, I'll come back to that, because it's when you find the right, as you say, motivation, then the work, it's not hard work. But so yeah, what you eat is really important. And I don't necessarily mean like, oh, you need carbs, or you need, I don't know, don't eat meat. I don't know, like I genuinely, I'm in a position that I'm like, who am I to tell what people should eat? I mean, who am I to say? The thing that helped me find my connection with what I believe is a good connection with food is, so I said earlier that my dad was the one who did all the cooking, right? Because my mom could not and still cannot cook, and she'd have no problem me saying this. I don't know how she has gotten through life. She's in her 80s now and still really can't cook. So dad was the one who did all the cooking, and he was a really good cook, thank God. But he learned to cook from his grandmother, who was a Creole Seychelloise. So he learned to cook in a way that was really kind of old school, and he just held on to that. So by the time we showed up, I mean, my parents had me and my brother quite late in life. By the time we showed up, he was very, very suspicious of processed food, except corned beef. Weirdly, he loved it. But anyway, apart from corned beef. And like, he would never buy, if he was going to buy chicken, he would never buy like a chicken in a supermarket or something. It was always like, I'm going to go and, find like a farmer, like even, it wasn't even called farmer's market there. It was like what do you call it? Wholesale food markets, like places where restaurants would go to get, stuff in bulk. And he would go there and hassle them for like, I don't need like 2 tons of chicken, I just need 1, and he would bring it home. So he was really, really skeptical, very suspicious of processed food. And somehow that kind of that sort of handed down to me. And I think it's because of my dad. He's just had this like very old fashioned, because he's born in 1930, kind of like, he's just very suspicious of anything that didn't look like it was when it was either walking or on the tree or whatever. So maybe that's another way of looking at organic food without calling it organic food, is, does it look like food? And actually for a lot of people that, you know, they're so far that like that disconnection with where your food comes from and how it's produced is so big now that I think a lot of people struggle to answer that question. And you know, the question that really like bugs me is, why is it more expensive to buy a bag of organic potatoes covered in mud than it is to buy the equivalent weight of processed oven ready chips? I don't understand. I don't understand how you can, you know, all the inputs, like, you know, the fertilizers, the pesticides are gone into growing. So all of that, all the processing, peeling of the potato, the chipping it, the packaging, the branding of the packaging, and all the kind of whatever processing is done to make this thing that you can just put in the oven, you got chips. How is that still cheaper? I don't, you know, I'm really find that really interesting.
Yeah. And it creates food privilege.
Yeah.
That's what it does. It creates food privilege, and then it keeps those options for those who are privileged. I'm aware that health, you know, we tend to forget about those socioeconomic determinants of health. And it's exactly that. You know, if you can't afford a car and you can only walk to the local shop, and the local shop are selling a bag of potatoes versus a bag of chips, and you've got 30 quid to feed your 3 kids that week.
Exactly.
Yeah, it, you know, and that comes back to policy and all of those kind of things, and, you know, health inequalities and everything that I could bang on about for a really long time. But you said something there, and I wonder whether or not you will agree with this. You know about your dad coming home and he cooked every night, and food, did it play a central part in your family life, like bringing everyone together? Because, you know, with our obsession with processed food, I think has come this kind of mindset that eating is, it's a duty, it's another thing we fit in between all the other stuff we try and get done in a day. And there's, you know, we've gotten that actually eating is something we do to connect, and it's something we do to share, and it's something we do as a family, and it's something that brings us all together. And I think we've come to kind of reach for the ready meal and reach for the processed cheese string to meet an energy need, because it's the thing we do because we have to. And that's kind of that, I think there's a mindset, there's a distortion there that perhaps we didn't used to have in the past. I mean, you know, when you and I were growing up, you know, we did all sit down for dinner, we did all sit down for a Sunday roast, but now we're just obsessed with filling our time.
I think it's so much there, definitely, that you know, that kind of I would agree with, for sure. I think a big thing was my dad did domestic, he did it dad style. So, you know, he never had that sense of like, oh, gotta cook the dinner again. You know, there wasn't like, no, you know, this is ceremony. And actually more than that, like he acted like a head chef, you know, so it wasn't like he was in the kitchen peeling potatoes while we were all like, he's like, right, you're peeling garlic, you're doing this. And he would be like orchestrating, and he would get my brother and myself like involved in cooking. So my job was generally, because like the kind of the Creole style of cooking is like the base is always ginger, garlic, onions. You just, whatever you're going to cook, you know, you got to start peeling garlic like till the cows come home. So that was my job. And so yeah, ginger, garlic and onions, whatever happened, I knew that was what I was doing at some point in my evening. And because, you know, it was like dad style, daddy parent, you know, daddy daycare kind of thing, he's like, this isn't an option. This isn't like, oh, come and cook with me. This is like, you got a job to do, because we've all got jobs to do, because your mom is out. Because actually my dad, especially, you know, sort of as I was a teenager, he was a bit older than my mom. So he kind of like retired and was a stay-at-home dad, which is really quite revolutionary for the time.
Yeah.
And my mom was the one out working. So he had this whole thing of like, right, you know, your mother is out there, and when she comes home, this, you know, this is to be done. And partly because she couldn't cook as well, of course. But so that was a big part of it, is that cooking became an activity that we just did. But then what happened is, while we were cooking, in that sort of sideways way that, you know, I guess guys do, exchange stories, he'd tell us about things that he did when he was young. And my dad was a real raconteur. He could tell a story. So it actually became like, I would not have thought that then. I just thought I was peeling onions and garlic, right? It was definitely a bonding experience. The stories and the laughs. And he was like, oh, he was a taskmaster. You know, he would like really, he was so pernickety about everything. Oh, no, you don't stir like that. You stir like that. You know, it was not like, oh, you know, fun. You know, he worked as hard, but at the same time, like we had fun doing it because we talked, we exchanged stories. And then by the time mom came home, it was like you eat, and then we'd all sit around the table and eat and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you know, our family had its own, you know, version of dysfunction, don't get me wrong. So it wasn't all like, you know, the Waltons or something. But that's showing my age with that reference. But that was a really important part, is food preparation. And just knowing that there was a time of the day that's what happened. And I think I'm probably still conditioned to do that because you know, I'm a single parent now, and I, you know, juggle a lot of stuff, but I still feel like that's what I do in the evening. Is like, so I still mostly cook. I mean, obviously there are days when we'll just get like a ready meal. There are days when we get takeout, you know. I don't think there's any shame in
it's
that
life.
at all.
That's life.
Exactly. Yeah, there are days where I'm just like, you know, I'm done. Like, I don't even know what to cook today, you guys, you know, stuff. So, but no, fundamentally though, I don't feel good when we've, you know, I'm like, okay, we got through. Today was one of those days. And then actually, it's not, I don't feel like bad, but I'm just like, it's a different type of satisfaction. It was like, I got a workaround today. So that makes me feel good. At least I acknowledge that it was a step too far today to cook. But I love it. The days when I have that time to cook, and it's nothing, you know, like I literally just cook lentils and rice sometimes, and, you know, just because it's a quick meal. Kids love it. It's healthy. It's done, and it's cheap. You know? Yeah. So yeah, so all that stuff is really important. And I tell you what, there's a funny little story as well about meal times. And, you know, gosh, I tell you, as someone who works on TV, I feel really guilty about this. But my grandmas were from Seychelles, so we'd go to Seychelles for holidays and to see them. And so this was not like, you know, going to some boutique hotel. This was like, you know, the backyards of Seychelles. And in Seychelles, like I think right into the 80s, into the late 80s actually, TV would start about 5, and then it would stop at 7. It would just go off air, the one channel. And it would go off air for about an hour so that everyone could sit down and have dinner. And then it would restart at 8, and they'd play the national anthem, and everyone would gather around to watch, you know, like Dallas or something, you know. And that was it. And then it would go off air for the rest of the night. And so, you know, it was like this thing. They were like, oh no, we got to stop. We'll go off air so people can have their dinner, and then we'll come back. And I was like, wow, you know, imagine that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Now I'm texting my 14-year-old, will you appear for dinner? Because I know I can get hold of him that way. And that, I mean, what are your thoughts about, as you know, as a mum, what are your thoughts about the next generation and the pressures that they're under?
Oh, deep breath.
It's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's really hard because you know, that literally just plays into all my kind of like, fears. You know, one thing I would say is in the face of all the kind of images and the things they're trying to live up to, you know, and where was I hearing there's this kind of new version of like body dysmorphia, which oh gosh, it was a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma, which is a must watch, by the way. But they talked about how, you know, plastic surgeons are now being asked to try and, it's called like Snapchat filters, you know, so people want to look like they do on a Snapchat filter. And they're asking plastic surgeons to kind of enhance the way they look. It's a thing, apparently. I only heard about this from this documentary about, so that's pretty scary. I'm going to do like positive spin here because I could go down that wormhole if I that myself. But there are some really positive things as well, because there's also access to a bigger variety of images depending on you know, the kind of digital ecosystem that you are in. And you know, one of the things that I really love is, you know, real mainstream artists, Lizzo, Billie Eilish. You know, I just look at these young women and I'm like, wow, because they really embrace this idea of like, you know, be yourself and your whole self. And what I noticed, like even with personalities like Maya Jama, like yes, she can look whoa amazing, but she'll also post pictures of her like just out of bed, or when she's like, you know, got like food poisoning or something. So I do think, you know, that there are personalities out there that really try and be honest about, you know, the days they've got like the full makeup treatment and the days when they're really feeling like crap. And I do, so I think, you know, there are real beacons out there to kind of clip into and let yourself be those, you know, let them be your anchors. I mean, personally, what I've found is as I got into powerlifting, I started following loads of powerlifting accounts, you know, got totally obsessed. And I started to notice like a shift in, I know it's going to sound so weird, so just go with it. But I noticed a shift in the kind of women I would look at, you know, and you know how we do that as women, you know, we'll sort of notice like, oh, what you're wearing, what you're doing, the hair is doing this. And I would start to notice women that are really strong looking. So not like archetypal, like tall, very thin model, but like big, strong women. And I was just like, whoa, you know, and I'll be like, yes, that's, you know, that's what I like to see, you know. And I started getting really kind of like, oh, look, there's this whole different aesthetic that I've not accessed before because I've not been into this particular sport. That, oh, you know, that's really interesting. And I just found it like, it was just an interesting observation to make of myself, that if I feed my mind a different image, then it shifts and recalibrates what I think is something that I want to aspire to. And that's me, grown woman, you know. So I just thought, wow, so how does that work with my daughter, for example, who, you know, is just becoming like, you know, just entering the world of like being on social media and all that stuff. I've held them back for as long as I could. And one of the things that I love is, because she's very sporty, is, you know, she's like, she has really different, like her icons are like Simone Biles. And recently we were watching, because she's getting into like, she was interested in basketball and like, oh, you know, so I was like, oh, let's like find some basketball women and you know, WNBA basketball players. And we were looking at Taya Cooper's account, and she is just such an amazing woman. And, you know, my daughter was like those, and I was like, yes, you know, if you can kind of feed, oh God, it sounds awful, but expose, better than feed, expose as like a huge diversity of images. If I think that's the way to kind of like push back on any kind of getting funneled down, just wanting to look like one type of person. And I mean, you know, that it's like, you know, the buzzword of the year is diversity, inclusivity. That's why it's important. And it's like literally, you know, you want to see all shapes and sizes and colors and representations of as many different versions of human as possible, because then it just balances out. And then you kind of, hopefully what you then can do is be yourself, you know, and, you know, your healthiest self, which is basically, does my body do what I ask of it as well as is equipped to do, you know? That's about as good as it gets, I reckon, you know, for a healthy body.
Yes. And as a mum, your approach is exactly that. I try and get my girls, I've got a 14-year-old, I have an 11, almost 12-year-old, and 10 in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And they, trying to help them diversify the images that they're exposed. But even as you say, as a grown adult, that connection you make between that kind of, that ideal that you're sold all the time, you know, that, you know, big tits, little waist, peachy ass, all of that, and actually looking at women for what they can do. And I think it's that shift. It's also showing girls and boys, because I think we're seeing boys more and more present with kind of fitspo body dysmorphia around muscular structure and so forth. Trying to shift that conversation away to role models who are showing what their bodies can do, This is what your body could do. This is the vehicle for living this really full life. It isn't an aesthetic by which your worth is measured. And that kind of shift, and as you say, because social media can be a really positive thing. I think as parents, we can be really fearful of it, really fearful, but actually it can be a really positive and inspiring place.
But it's interesting. Like I sometimes feel really bad, like when and I'm like sing, like in a way it's like, well, thin people, I mean, I was that person. I could not, my body would not be anything other than it was. I mean, the worst thing is like really flat chested, stick thin teenage girl that was like really gangly and really dorky. And it was just like, there's nothing that was going to change that, I mean, I not that I even tried to, but I did feel really self-conscious of it. And the thing that actually made me the most self-conscious was in sport. And I remember people always assuming that I was weak because I was thin. And then I believed I was weak because I was thin.
Yeah.
And people say, they'd go like, oh gosh, your wrists look like you're just going to break, if I pick something up. And so I started to believe that. And, just kind of bringing it back full circle about, the connection between Jimmy, that training and, my journey with Fitness Wild, which is the other hat that he wears, has been massive. I mean, honestly, like not in a sort of like body transformation way, although that's really fine as well. But I mean, like for me, it's like the knowledge, my self-knowledge has, I did not know that I was as strong as I am. I didn't know I could lift the things I can lift. And that is like what I love about the way they do things. It's functional strength. And, the sort of like in my mid 40s now, to feel like I can still, like my body will still do what I ask of it is just like, I am forever daily grateful for that, because I don't take that for granted. And it's just been such a blessing. But that sort of, when I look at that journey that I've made, and one that I never really kind of, it was never like a headline, it was never at the front of my mind in terms of like my body and blah blah blah. There were other things that bothered me, but not that. But like I look back and I go, yeah, I had a self-belief, a limiting self-belief that I was weak. That was that. And a limiting self-belief that I couldn't sprint because I was thin and I didn't have the muscles to like power my levers. So, there were things like that I just took as read, and I didn't realize that, well, actually, you gotta, if you want to get strong, you gotta put a little bit into that to get back what you're asking your body to do. It will adapt. It will lead, you gotta lead it to what you're asking it to do and put in the work a bit. So, that's been such a revelation. And I hope that, that just by osmosis, that my kids, because for me, like training is like my self-care. That's the thing I prioritize. And I hope that just simply by that they've seen that, through some pretty tough times, like the last 5 years, they've seen that no matter what, that's what I do. And they've seen that like it centers me. I'm always like, if I can train, I'm good. And, I don't necessarily expect them to do exactly what I do, but I just hope there's something there that, just brushes off a bit,
Yeah. And they will, and at the moment, as they're tweens and teens, they kind of like push back, don't they, a little bit against, they're trying to separate their sense of identity from being tied to us as mum. And but I'm exactly the same. I think as if I get up in the morning and I do some yoga or I meditate or I work with weights or whatever, I hope that my kids see it, and they see it and I always talk about it in terms of I feel strong, I feel well, I have energy, or mum's stressed, I'm going to go work out because it helps me feel less stressed. As you say, exactly by osmosis, it will find its way into their psyche and set them up for a healthy relationship with their bodies. I hope so. And if you had an opportunity to stand on top of the mountain and speak to the world, Jill, What would you say? What's the one thing you would want everybody to hear and to know and to take on board if they could go away with one thing? What do you
Oh
think
my
that would
God.
be? It doesn't have to be one. No one ever gives me one. It's always a bit more than one.
You know what? That is like the best question and the worst question as well. You're like, really? Oh my gosh. It's a bit like, oh, I never met my grandfather. My grandfather died long before I was born. And I remember having this dream that I was walking with him in like a grove. I was a kid then. And I was just holding his hand. And he was like telling me what life meant, you know, like everything, like the secret of life. And I woke up and I was like, woo, you know, bear in mind my family, like, you know, we're all sort of, you know, even though we're like, no, we don't believe that stuff, we are superstitious. So, you know, that kind of thing when you dream of dead people's not good. Or is it good? I don't know. It's a message right now. Anyway, so I go down to breakfast. I'm like, oh, I grabbed a grandpa. And they're like, really? And and they're like, oh yeah, he was telling me the secret of life or something like that. And they said, so what did he say? And I was like, I forgot. I literally just there, I can't remember. So I feel this is my moment, like I'm stood on the mountain, like, I know there's something.
Grandpa told me. Now where is it? Where is it?
That's going me on the mountain. Give me a moment. Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna say what I try and live by, which is just, you know, make the world a better place. You know, I know it sounds so naive, but if we all just did one little bit to try and do that, surely, you know.
Be the change you want to see.
Yeah, I know, it's cliche. I wish I could come up with something better. But
no, but do you know what, Jill? I wish the world were full of Jills.
Oh, don't.
But don't, I do. As a mum, as a woman, as a professional, as all of those things.
Well, geez, man, that's. Oh, thank you. You know,
but it's very true. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. We're about to swap another hat. We're going to go into end of school run, pick up hat, and start another job. But thank you so much for your time today, Jill. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you have taken something away from listening, perhaps one small action you can put into practice today. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so pop on over to Reframe Club where you can share them, your own reflections and experiences. We would love to hear from you. As always, here at Reframe Club, we are rooting for you.